everyone, this is Tamara from shelfaddiction.com, and welcome to episode 38. Joining me today is Coastal Magic Convention featured author Kait Ballenger. She's one of the talented authors that will be in attendance at CMC this upcoming February in Daytona Beach, Florida. Kait Ballenger is the author of adult paranormal romance series, The Execution Underground. Be sure to check out Kait's series and find her on social media. All the links can be found in the show notes. If you'd like to comment on this interview, tweet at me on Twitter at shelfaddiction.
Hey, Kait, thanks for joining me today. How have you been?
I'm okay. I've had better times, but I'm doing all right.
Oh, that's good. I know you experienced a hurricane recently.
Yeah. Hurricane Matthew came through Daytona Beach area. We live just outside of Daytona Beach, and we had some pretty bad damage to our home. So we're kind of misplaced at the moment, staying with my in-laws. So we're not too happy about that, but we are really grateful that all of us were safe. Me, my husband, my son, and all of our pets included. So we're just really glad that everybody's safe, and we're hoping to get the repairs underway. But things are moving forward, so, we're looking in the right direction.
Oh, that's good news. Well, I'm glad you're here today. I'm glad you were able to make it.
Me too.
Okay, so let's jump right in, shall we? So I know that writers read as much as us book nerds. So do you have a book or two that you're reading right now?
Right now, I'm actually reading Dragonfly and Amber, the second in the Outlander series. My mom has been a big fan of this series, since I was a small child, and I didn't really ever get interested in it until the show debuted on Starz, and then I was immediately hooked. So I read through the first Outlander book, and so now, even though I've watched season 2, I'm reading book 2 and hoping to maybe read book 3 before the next season comes out. So I'm kind of on a historical romance kick at the moment.
Nice. I never read those books either, but I love the show. So obviously the book is better, right?
Well, the show is wonderful because it actually follows the books very, very closely. Mm-hmm. So I do still like the book slightly better, but it's very, very close for me. And that's surprising for me to say, because usually I'm gung-ho about saying the book is always better than the show, but it's a really fantastic show.
That's awesome. Now, the only thing I have like a hang up with watching the show or movie first is that once I see the characters on TV or on the big screen, that's who I envision when I read the book. Are you doing that too?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I usually like to read the book first, but in this case, my mom had been nagging me to read these for years, and I was like, but they're just so long. And I really wished I had listened to her and read the books before I watched the show. But because I definitely do imagine Sam Hagen and Catriona Balfe as Claire and Jamie throughout the books, but I think it's okay. It's kind of like rewatching the show with extra information. So
that's awesome. Okay, so tell me a little bit about maybe any books and or authors that may have influenced your writing style over the years.
Well, I read a lot of urban fantasy when I before I first started getting into romance. So I really liked Laurel K. Hamilton's Anita Blake series and Charlaine Harris's Sookie Stackhouse series, the Southern Vampire books. So, and that was really before I began reading sort of straight romance novels. And then once I really started to get into romance, the big introduction to that for me was J.R. Ward, and reading paranormal romance and other authors like Sherilyn Kenyon, Gina Showalter. And so all of those were kind of like early influences of writers that I really enjoyed and wanted to, emulate some of their writing qualities. So the sort of strong heroines that you find in the urban fantasy books and the super sexy heroes you find in romance.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. You may not know this, but urban fantasy and paranormal romance is like my favorite genre ever. Oh, I love it.
I do too. And, and it's so great when you find others who love it too.
Yeah. And I could tell, like, just a little tidbit for the listeners. I did read your novella in your first two books. And I did kind of, get that J.R. Ward vibe a little bit, but in a much different, like, it was like your writing is obviously not like her writing, but like the whole, kind of guys hooking up with their girls and, that kind of thing. I thought that was like reminiscent a little bit, but it's its own story, which is awesome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. A funny little tidbit is that when my agent was trying to sell the first book in the series, Twilight Hunter, she pitched me as like when she was pitching the book to editors, she was saying it's like Supernatural, the TV show, meets J.R. Ward. You'll love it.
Yeah, that's kind of because instead of like, you're right, that's kind of a really good explanation for it.
Yeah, I thought that was a really clever pitch on her part. So,
absolutely.
But she's great with things like that.
Well, that's what agents are for.
Yeah.
So, do you have any favorite authors, or are those favorite authors the same ones that may have influenced your writing a little bit?
Those are all some of my favorites. I can't say I have one favorite for sure. I'm a diehard Harry Potter fan. So I do love J.K. Rowling and a lot of YA fiction as well. The Hunger Games, things like that sort, Twilight, all those sort of big name ones that have been turned into movies. I'm pretty big fans of. So those are some of my favorites. Right now I'm on a kick of really being in love with Kerrigan Byrne's Victorian Rebels series, another historical romance. I guess I'm kind of on that kick right now. And it's, I'm really loving her books at the moment, but I can't say that I really have one favorite author. I'm trying to think of some others I enjoy. Rainbow Rowell, I really love her books. I read really eclectically, and so all of the ones, I've mentioned are favorites in their own ways, and I love them all for different reasons. I don't know that I could pick just like one or two.
Yeah, I understand. It's like asking to choose your favorite child, right?
Yes.
Awesome. So what inspired you to start writing books?
Well, I had been a reader for so long and so in love with, reading in various genres, that it kind of just came about organically. I had kind of enjoyed making up stories when I was a child and in my young teens, just like to, play around with on my own, like things that I'd write just for myself or for my friends. And it wasn't really until I was starting college that I realized, hey, maybe I kind of want to try writing my own book. I love reading so much. Maybe I could actually do this. And so I kind of just started writing to see if I could finish a book. And then I eventually did. I actually wrote 2 YA novels that have never been published and might be published in the future. Who knows? I'm kind of waiting to see if I want to go that route. But I wrote those while I was still in college and was enjoying that genre, but when I started querying them and trying to get them out to agents, I was getting good responses, but kind of like a close but no cigar sort of thing. So at that time was when I was really getting into reading romance really heavily and had been reading romance for a while. So I decided, I'm going to try my hand at, some adult romance rather than YA with romantic elements. And that's just kind of what stuck for me. So there was never really a moment when I decided, oh, I'm going to be a writer. It was just kind of, I liked reading so much that I figured, hey, I'm going to give this a try. And then it stuck.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you did because you know what? Your books are really great and the reviews are great. So congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we jump into talking about the series and then the featured title, let's talk a little bit about the cover art. Now, I love cover art. I always have to talk about cover art. I can't resist.
And with romance, how can you resist with all those yummy men on the cover?
Yes. Look, did you meet any of your models?
I have not, unfortunately. I really wished I had.
Did you pick them, or did your publisher do that for you?
My publisher did that for me. The way Harlequin's art department goes is they generally, once the book has been turned into your editor, they send you what's called an art fact sheet. And it's kind of a really detailed interview in which you describe very heavily what your characters look like. And you can send them, like, if you have celebrity lookalikes, you can send them pictures of, people that you think you envision your characters as, and you describe all their different character traits. And then from that, they do a casting call for the models and choose from there. And so, I've been pretty pleased with how they've done all of my covers, because they find guys who are really close to how I envision the characters, particularly on book 2, Immortal Hunter. The main character is supposed to be David. I don't think they could have found a model that looked more like I envisioned the character in my head.
Really? Let me take a quick look at that cover right quick, because I know that was the blue one, right? Yeah,
that's the blue one, and he looks so much like I imagined the hero. Like, it's uncanny. When I got the cover, I just couldn't believe it.
That's awesome. That's very cool. They always say don't judge a book by its cover, but like you were saying, in romance, especially in fantasy, urban fantasy, the cover is what draws us readers to look at the description, to read a page or two.
Yeah, absolutely. Covers are so important, because as much, and I would read a book that doesn't have a great cover, but it's that cover that catches your eye initially.
Absolutely. Well, I like it. So let's jump into the series, which is called Execution Underground. Can you tell us a little bit about the series overall?
So the series, unlike a lot of paranormal romance, actually focuses on a group of human hunters who have sort of these elite abilities, and they are trained to hunt supernatural creatures and sort of keep them at bay from, attacking or, hurting the general populace. And they're a part of this clandestine kind of secretive organization called the Execution Underground, and that's where they get all their resources to battle these big nasty paranormal creatures.
So each book, though, kind of centers around a different hunter.
Yes.
And obviously there's an ongoing arc overall that kind of connects all the books, right?
Yes, yeah.
So do you think that, like, your featured title is Midnight Hunter, which is your most recent release, do you recommend that people go back to the beginning, or could they start there?
I think they could start with Midnight Hunter. My editor and I both work really hard to try and make sure that even though the books are related, that each book in the series sort of stands alone. So I think there's, enough context and backstory given in the later books that somebody could pick them up there. And I actually have had readers start with the later books and then sort of go back and read the beginning. Personally, I always read books from the very first one in the series. I never sort of start mid-series. Because I think there's just something great about seeing it in the order that the author intended. But I definitely think that readers could pick up the later books and have no problem jumping right in.
That's cool. And I totally understand what you mean, because I'm a series girl. Actually, a little side note, someone in my book club kind of asked me, could I pick a book that wasn't the beginning of a series for once? And I'm like, I can't. I love series. I can't help it.
Yeah, I do too. Actually, funny enough, the only series that I think I've ever started one of the later books before the first one was, I just mentioned that I was really enjoying that series now, was Kerrigan Byrne's Victorian Rebels, because a friend had given me the second book in the series, the hunter, and I didn't realize it was the second book, so I picked it up and read it, and then I was like, oh, I didn't read the series in order, so I had to go back.
Oh, that's awesome.
That was my first experience with it, but I was able to pick that up sort of mid-series anyway, and it was really enjoyable. So I hope, and my goal is that readers can do the same with my books.
Very cool. So since the Execution Underground focuses on human hunters with abilities, where does your story take place? Obviously, it's a real place, yeah?
Yes, it takes place in Rochester, New York. This leg of the series is focused on that division of the Execution Underground. So the way the Execution Underground is supposed to be set up is that they have different sort of units or divisions within various cities around the U.S. and internationally. So, but this particular leg of the series is focused on the hunters that comprise the Rochester, New York division.
Okay. What made you choose Rochester, New York?
Well, when I was actually brainstorming the initial ideas for the city, I wanted somewhere that was a large city setting, preferably up north, is somewhere that had a lot of cold weather, because I sort of come from that background. Even though I'm living in Florida now, I was originally from just outside Detroit. Mm-hmm. So I wanted something with that kind of feel, but I wasn't really ready to make Detroit my setting yet, even though I'm currently writing a series set there. But so my original idea was to do New York City, but then I kind of had a friend who was like, nah, I think that's kind of really cliched. And, I agreed with her. She was right. And she herself was actually from Rochester, which isn't that much further north than New York City. So she was like, well, what about Rochester? And I was like, I think that would be pretty perfect. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how it came about.
Awesome. Well, I do. I've never been to Rochester, New York, but I have heard of that city many times. So it's definitely not really a very small, unheard of city. So that's kind of cool. Yeah. Awesome. I'm looking forward. Well, I'll ask you later. We've got to talk about your new series that's coming out that's supposed to be in Detroit, because I'm in Metro Detroit as well. So I always like to hear that. So we know this is obviously paranormal romance / urban fantasy, and we've already kind of drew some lines to J.R. Ward, but what's the heat level? Is it like J.R. Ward level heat? Like how 1 to 10, 10 being borderline erotica and 1 being, I don't know, inspirational Christian fiction or something. Where do you think this lies?
It's definitely as hot as J.R. Ward, so I don't want to say it's close to erotica, but I'd put it somewhere. I'd say maybe like an 8. Mm-hmm. It's pretty hot.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, definitely. So it's a good adult dose of romance.
Yeah, I definitely don't shy away from the bedroom scenes in my books, so.
Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about the heroines for your stories. Like, I always love strong, outspoken women that can, take care of themselves, but also not be, they ride that line of not being too dominant for a strong guy, but can take care of themselves. How do you think your heroines in this series fare in that arena?
Well, I'd hope they do a pretty good job of that, because that's always kind of the goal that I have in mind. Because oftentimes when I read, particularly in paranormal or urban fantasy, you get heroines that are either so strong that they're almost invincible, or so weak that you just can't stand them. Mm-hmm. And so I really try to find a happy medium in my books. So I hope that I give all my heroines a certain level of, I guess you could say, badassery and agency. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I try to be conscious of the fact that even though they're supposed to be strong and sort of kick-ass, I'm thinking specifically right now of the heroine in the prequel to the series, Shadow Hunter Tiffany, who is a vampire hunter in her own right, mm-hmm. or also Frankie, who is the heroine of Twilight Hunter, the first full-length book in the series, who is a werewolf packmaster. So they kind of have these sort of badass roles that allow them to be strong and sort of stand beside these very dominant alpha heroes, but at the same time I try to make sure that they still have flaws, so that way they're not invincible, and they still can have moments of weakness despite being, you know, strong ladies. So I'm hoping that I'm kind of walking that line between invincible heroine and damsel in distress. I'd like to fall somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, the heroes have to save them at least one good time. At least one.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to take away the chance for the heroes to be, you know, the strong alpha heroes and save the day. But at the same time, you don't want, you know, the heroine to constantly be in distress. So I usually try to make it that, you know, throughout the book, you've got kind of an equal dynamic of them helping each other. And then usually at the end, you know, something happens that maybe the heroine, you know, either gets kidnapped or something, you know, and then while the hero helps to save her, she also kind of does some of the work herself in the end, is usually what I try to strike up. So,
because I think also your heroes, though, while they are alphas, like you said, they're also not like cavemanish, really. You know, so they have some balance as well.
I hope to get that, because I really like the sort of heavy alpha heroes, but I don't want them to be like, you know, sort of beat on their chest like I am He-Man guys, you know, like I'm really striving in my books to make my characters, you know, both fit that want of what we look for in a romance of the alpha heroes and the strong females, but also at the same time have a little bit of qualities of realism and be a little, you know, realistic. So they all need to be, you know, strong in their own ways and have flaws in others. So I try to do that. Characterization is really, really important to me, and I would say one of the things I spend the most time on in my books. So I'm hoping that comes across.
Okay, I think so. Just from the 2.5, I guess, or 2 full books in a novella that I read. I mean, I think you do a great job. And, you know, I don't, and really, honestly, anyone that watches my reviews or reads my reviews, I don't just dial out compliments for no good reason. I just really, if I read something good, I say it as fact. Like, I really enjoyed it. I'm not one to just hand out good reviews. So the fact that you get a good review of my book means it's really good.
Oh, thank you.
Tell me a little bit about what you like most about the characters that you developed for this series, and maybe even especially the characters, I guess, Shane and Vera. I think those are the ones in Midnight Hunter. What about those two particularly, since we're talking about the new book?
Well, what I liked most about Shane and Vera is they were kind of a little different from the other hero and heroines in the series. The first 3 heroes are definitely, you know, more of your traditional alpha males. But Shane, while he definitely has his sort of strong alpha qualities, is painted to be more sort of the intellectual of the group. So he's, you know, he's extremely intelligent, but he doesn't quite, you know, he's not the muscle of the crowd. And so what I liked about writing him was that it was a really different dynamic from what I had written in previous books, and I had to find ways to still really show how strong and what a true hero he was, even though he wasn't the type to, you know, just flash his muscles and beat somebody down, you know what I mean? Right. So I really enjoyed playing around with that with him, because it was a thin balance of, you know, staying true to his character as somebody who's, you know, who's, yes, trained to do all these sort of badass things, but ultimately is more likely to use intelligence to win in the end. And so that's what I enjoyed most about him, was kind of that he was a change up from the previous characters in the series. And with Vera, a lot of the other heroines that I had written about thus far had, had they had their flaws, but ultimately, they weren't struggling super heavily with them. But Vera, as a heroine, struggles very much with her flaws, and I think that in some ways kind of made her a little bit more realistic, because I think all women can kind of relate to sometimes feeling down about themselves or not liking a certain quality about themselves. And what I loved about Vera so much in the end was just how Shane kind of teaches her almost to kind of forgive those qualities in herself and still loves her anyway.
Oh, that's nice. Okay, see, now I gotta hurry up and read that, because I'm curious to see what she's down on herself about.
I won't share it because I don't want to give too much away.
So, did you have any challenges when it came to, research? I mean, you mentioned that Shane is a different kind of alpha male, so maybe did you have any issues when writing it? Psychological, writer's block, any of that?
Well, one of the biggest hangups to writing it was that at the time that it was being written, I was pregnant with my son. So that's always kind of a roadblock, is battling tiredness from that. But that aside, from things in the manuscript itself, it was kind of a challenge to write a hero so different from what I was used to doing. And there were often times where I would kind of have to catch myself and ask, like, is this am I writing Shane doing this because this is what he as a hero would do? Or is it because I'm used to these sort of heroes who, to solve their problems, they, go after the bad guy right away, all brawn and muscle. So I kind of had to keep constantly reminding myself of who he was as a character. So that was kind of a struggle. And then also, I did do a lot of research in this book because Shane is a witch hunter, and Vera is actually a witch who practices both white and black magic. So I kind of tried to do a little bit of research into like necromancy and things of that sort. Mm-hmm. Kind of history and lore surrounding that. And it's surprisingly complicated. So that was a little bit of a challenge too. So I kind of had to find a way to stay with some of the lore that I had found, while also kind of making it my own thing and putting a fresh twist on it.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, so is there anything else you would like to share with the listeners about this book before we move on to other topics?
I will say that even though Shane is more of the intellectual, I don't want to call him a beta hero, I will say I was very glad that a lot of my readers who were the fans of the sort of big alpha hero types still managed to fall in love with him. So I'm glad. So for those that are kind of like, oh, I don't know that I like a more sort of beta-ish hero, I guess my message would be that I'd hope they would give him a chance, because I think he's got those sort of alpha qualities. They're just a little bit more hidden than with the other heroes. He doesn't feel the need to show them off.
Yeah. So he doesn't need to flex his muscle to show that he's got things under control.
Exactly.
Very cool. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about future projects. You mentioned another series earlier. Is that what you're working on right now?
Yeah, I don't know a release date for it yet because it's still out on submission with the editors, but hopefully I will know some dates about that before the end of the year. But what I'm working on right now is actually a little different from the Execution Underground, because it's a romantic suspense series, and it's set in Detroit. And it's centered around those who know anything about, Detroit politics and things that go on there. a few years back, they had enacted an initiative called Detroit One that's kind of meant to encourage cooperation between different branches of law enforcement to sort of bring violent predators to justice. Mm-hmm. So the series is called Detroit One, and it centers around a group of men who are a part of this initiative. And so the very first book is about an FBI agent by the name of Lee Schultz, and his heroine is a woman named Heather Campbell, who is a sexual assault victims advocate. So it very much has like traditional romantic suspense feel, but I would kind of pitch it as like if you liked Law and Order SVU, and that this would be a series for you.
Oh, nice. Very cool. So that's definitely switching gears a little bit.
Yeah. I love paranormal, but I love to also read across all romantic subgenres. And so I was just feeling like I kind of wanted to switch things up and try something new. So we'll see how the romantic suspense foray goes. But the first book is out on submission right now, and I'm working on book 2 at the moment. So...
Awesome. So for the Execution Underground fans, do you have more of that in the pipeline as well, or?
I'm hoping so. My contract with Harlequin only extended until Shane's book, and I'm sort of trying to decide what I want to do next with that leg of the series, but it will definitely be finished. I'm just not sure when that will be, so it's still kind of a to-be-announced thing, but it's in the works.
Okay, sounds good. So there are always writers in the audience who are always looking for some sage advice. Do you have any advice for aspiring writers?
My advice for aspiring writers would really just be 2 things. The first is don't give up and don't let anyone tell you, that you can't achieve your dreams, because, you hear a lot of naysayers, especially in the beginning, you're never going to get published. You know how unlikely it is that, people get published or they get an agent or whatever. And sometimes those naysayers can even be other authors. So be wary of that, and don't really let them get you down. Early in my writing career, was kind of around the time that self-publishing was really becoming a thing. And so I had a lot of friends, and nothing is wrong with self-publishing. I totally support indie authors as well. But a lot of my friends were kind of choosing to go that route because they kept telling me that, you're never going to get picked up by an agent and get with a traditional publisher. That's just not how things go anymore. But I very much had in mind that was the path for me, and that's what I wanted to do. And so I just stuck to it, and that's how things worked out for me, and it's worked out pretty well. So I guess the first would be to don't let anybody be a naysayer, stick to your dreams. And the second piece of advice I would give is that you really just have to put your butt in the chair, whether or not you're feeling that inspiration. There's going to be times when you don't really feel like writing, and you're on deadline, or you have to write, or you've got to get that chapter finished by X date. And I often find that most times when I sit down at the computer to type, or I sit down with my notebook with a pen and paper, I don't feel inspired when I first sit down. It's only once I kind of force myself to get there and start, kind of slogging through it that I find that inspiration. So I guess the second piece of advice would be to put your butt in the chair and, don't wait for inspiration to hit. Inspiration can be overrated.
Oh, that's great advice. Totally. So just start doing it and it will come, right? Just start and it will come.
Yeah. And there's always going to be days when you feel more inspired than others. There's times when I get away from the computer and I know that a lot of what I've written, I'm probably not going to like later on, or I'm going to end up deleting, but at least I've gotten something done. And usually you have to get through those places in order to get to the really good stuff. And then there's other days where I sit down around and everything is magic. So you really just kind of have to, force yourself to be there and get the writing done in order for that magic to happen.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I'm sure that writers out there appreciate that advice. So let's talk about Coastal Magic just for a little bit. You've been to this convention before, right?
Yes. I was not there last year because I wanted to be, but I missed registration because the registration was just after my son was born. So I was in a crazy haze of newborn, related things. And so I wasn't able to attend last year, but I have attended the years previous to that.
So they have signings?
Yes, they do.
Okay. What books will you be having at the signing?
At the signing, I will likely have all the copies of the Execution Underground, and I also have, aside from the Detroit 1 series being out on submission, I have a few novellas that are out on submission, so maybe one of those, I'm not sure, but I will have, After Dark, which is the anthology with Gina Showalter that has Shadowhunter in it, Twilight Hunter, Immortal Hunter, and Midnight Hunter will all be there with me, available to sign, so.
Very cool. So I understand this convention is a pretty small convention. So what do you like most about doing a small convention like this?
What I like most about the small conventions like this is, at the bigger conventions, it seems like a lot of the events, are monopolized in a way by all the, the big New York Times and USA Today bestsellers. And you don't get to often see as many mid-list authors like myself. And so I think this event is friendly to both of those crowds. So you get to see a more diverse range of authors from, new authors to New York Times bestsellers, which I think is great. And I also think that it just makes for so much easier interaction with readers because when it's a small group of you and there's only so many people in the room, I feel like I, as a reader anyway, would feel more capable of approaching an author than if they were, surrounded by a huge crowd. So I feel like I almost get more reader interaction at the smaller conventions.
I appreciate that because sometimes the big conventions, it's very hard to, like you said, talk to authors, even if you're not necessarily wanting to talk to a large, well-known best-selling author. It's just so many people. It's just almost impossible, period. It's so many people.
Yeah, and it's hard to pick people out of a crowd, too. Like, you might pass by somebody that you would really want to talk to and not even realize it because it's just a crowd of people in the convention. But luckily with Coastal Magic, it's a much smaller, more intimate setting. So, like, you're not going to, be so flooded with people that you don't notice, who's walking down the hall beside you.
Yeah, that's very cool. This would be my first time going, so I'm definitely looking forward to it, especially since I get to moderate some panels. So I'm curious to see what the panels will be. Hopefully you'll be in one of mine because I think she likes to align us with our interests, so I might get something with paranormal.
That would be great.
Absolutely. Okay, so outside of Coastal Magic, are you doing any other events that you'd like to share?
It's sometime toward the beginning of next summer is the Space Coast Book Lovers signing. I will also be at that. It's in the Florida Space Coast, so down kind of near the sort of Cape Canaveral region, near Orlando-ish area. Kind of, for those who are not Floridians. And I will also be, since Romance Writers of America will be in Orlando next year, I will definitely be attending that as well.
Oh, cool. So people can find you. Awesome.
Yes.
All right. So it's that time. It's lightning round time.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, so 60 seconds, 60 questions. Some are book-related questions, some are not. Don't worry, no one ever answers 60, 20 if they're lucky. And the only rule is you have to answer, A or B if it's an A or B question. You can't say neither, and you can't say both.
Okay.
All right, let's do it. So I'm going to hit the little start timer. Ebooks or physical books?
Physical books.
Hero or villain?
Hero.
Tea or coffee?
Tea.
Name a book that you've read in one sitting.
Hunger Games.
Ooh. Name a book that you faked read.
Probably one of the books that I read for college.
Milk chocolate or dark chocolate?
Milk chocolate.
Vampires or werewolves?
Oh, that's a hard one. Vampires.
Beer or wine?
Beer.
Where is your favorite place to read?
Probably in bed.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Cake or pie?
Cake.
Early bird or night owl?
Night owl.
All right. See, look, we've already reached 60 seconds.
That goes by really fast.
Yeah, it does. And lets the listeners get to know you a little bit. So I appreciate you doing that. It was fun.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
Are there any last tidbits you'd like to share before we sign off?
I guess the only thing is that I hope new readers would, potentially give my series a try. And for my loyal readers that are looking for more, you will definitely see lots of more work from me in 2017.
Awesome. Kait, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for today's episode, and I'll see you all next week. Before you go, please hit that follow button on Spreaker, the only place where you can listen live, or subscribe and listen later on iTunes, Google Play Music, YouTube, and the Stitcher app. Thanks for listening. Until next time, happy reading. Bye, guys.